Tiwanaku is a megalithic stone site in Bolivia that mainstream archaeologists believe was erected around the 6th century CE. However, some compelling evidence suggests that the once bustling city may have been founded around the end of the last ice age, a cataclysmic period in Earth history. The advanced quality of the stonework, as well as a few clues in the remaining carvings, suggest that Tiwanaku may, in part, be a monument to a doomed civilization, whose survivors tried to share their knowledge with the world. Tiwanaku is located on the southeastern shore of Lake Titicaca in modern-day Bolivia, near the Peruvian border. The site is over 3,800 meters above sea level, significantly higher than most of the world's ancient ruins. The site is believed to have once been home to a thriving civilization, but there are no contemporary sources describing the city, so we know very little about it. Mainstream historians and archaeologists generally agree that the collapse of the Tiwanaku civilization occurred around 1100 CE. A century later, the Inca Empire began to emerge along South America's western coast, and it is widely believed that Tiwanaku's buildings served as the primary template for Inca architecture. The first written records of the ruins appear after the Spanish conquest of the Incas. One of the first and most thorough descriptions was written by a Spanish soldier named Pedro Cieza de León in 1549. León was surprised when natives told him that the monuments predated the Incas, and that their ancestors claimed that the city appeared suddenly in the course of a single night. In 1799, the Czech naturalist Thaddeus Hanke produced an illustrated account of the sites around Lake Titicaca. Hanke's sketches include one of the earliest depictions of Tiwanaku's now famous Gateway of the Sun. The French naturalist Alcide des Salines d'Orbigny was one of many foreign scholars to arrive after Bolivia gained its independence from Spain in 1825. In June 1833, d'Orbigny defined the three temple complexes with the names still used today: the Kalasasaya, Acapana, and Pumapunku. D'Orbigny's work helped inspire the Bolivian president, José Bolivian Segurola, to establish the first national museum devoted to Tiwanaku in 1846, and to begin collecting relics from the site. The first photos of Tiwanaku were captured by the US government's commissioner to Peru, Ephraim George Squire, who also mapped and sketched many of the structures for a book in 1877. More rigorous excavations began at the end of the 19th century, leading Swiss-American archaeologist Adolph Bandelier to argue the now widely accepted belief that the site was not only a ceremonial center, but a city that once supported several thousand people. By 1900, the Andes region had become a popular tourist destination, and many artifacts in Tiwanaku were looted as a result. Hundreds of monuments were also damaged when the stone was repurposed for modern construction, and as a result of poor archaeological work. Political changes in Bolivia after 1958 spurred the government to put all excavations under the leadership of Bolivian archaeologist Carlos Ponce Sanguinés, though collaboration with international researchers resumed in the early 1980s. Recent discoveries continue to uncover valuable finds. In March 2015, Bolivia's Tiwanaku Archaeological Research Center announced that a ground-penetrating radar survey revealed several underground anomalies that are likely monoliths, as well as a buried pyramid. Exploration in Lake Titicaca has been particularly fruitful because the lakebed was inaccessible to 20th century looters. For example, in 2019, marine archaeologists recovered ritual artifacts alongside animal remains dated from 700 to 1000 CE. The vast majority of Tiwanaku remains unexplored. By 2015, under 2% of the site had been excavated. There's no doubt that much more remains to be found. The site of Tiwanaku can be divided into two sections. The first is a cluster of structures around the Acapana Pyramid, 1 kilometer east of the modern town of Tiwanaku. The second is the Pumapunku Temple, a kilometer to the southwest of that. The artificial hill known as the Acapana Pyramid is 50 feet, or 15 meters high, and roughly 690 feet, or 210 meters on each side. Similar to the Egyptian pyramids, it's aligned with high accuracy to the cardinal directions. Only around 10% of the structure now remains, with the rest of the andesite blocks having been pillaged for construction. In its time, Akapana is thought to have been a step pyramid made from compacted earth and faced with large andesite blocks. However, we know very little of the pyramid's role in Tiwanaku society. Archaeologists have largely ruled out a purely decorative or ceremonial function because of what's inside it. The pyramid contains zigzagging stone channels which guided water down and out to a surrounding moat. These structures are accurate to 1/50th of an inch. Roughly 60 meters north of the Akapana pyramid is a nearly square enclosed courtyard known as the Sunken Temple or the Semi-Subterranean Temple. It is believed that the first settlements were centered around this courtyard, and that it was used for periodic rituals, with the structure likely aligned to celestial markers. Protruding from many of the stones making up the walls are dozens of carved stone heads known as the tenon heads, and it's thought that they could represent the ancestors of the many groups that comprised Tiwanaku's ritual political community at the time. West of the sunken temple is the Kalasasaya, also a large rectangular platform enclosed by walls, considered to have become the central ceremonial site at Tiwanaku. In the local Aymara language, Kalasasaya means place of the upright standing stones. A standout feature in the Kalasasaya is a freestanding monolith in the northwest corner of the enclosure known as the Gateway of the Sun. It is composed of gray-green andesite and stands roughly 12.5 feet or 3.8 meters wide and 10 feet or 3 meters high. It's decorated with skillful carvings, with the most prominent among them being what appears to be a type of calendar composed of 3 rows of 8 figures. Some unfinished carvings suggest that the work was suddenly abandoned. There are also 2 significant statues in the Kalasasaya. The larger of these figures is known as the Ponce monolith, and the smaller of the 2 is nicknamed the Friar. Both figures are clothed with fish scales from the waist down, and the scales are themselves designed with stylized fish heads. The Friar's belt also depicts several crustaceans. Southwest of the Kalasasaya is Pumapunku, a name that translates to the Puma Gate. Pumapunku is thought to have been an independent complex used for rituals, though it appears that the south side was never finished. While the waterline of Lake Titicaca has since lowered, it's believed that Pumapunku would have originally been positioned on the shore of the lake. Many of the enormous stones at Pumapunku weigh between 90 and 136 metric tons, or 100 to 150 tons each, with the largest in Pumapunku being 180 metric tons. Even more giant blocks lie on the ground in disarray. Mainstream archaeologists are still debating how the large stone blocks were moved from the quarries as far as 90 kilometers away. While some stones would have been transported over water, many stones show signs of having been dragged on one or more sides. Archaeologists reason that, like the Inca, Tiwanaku's builders would have had to have constructed roadbeds to transport these stones. However, as of 2013, only one potential road had been discovered. The high precision of Pumapunku's stonework is evident in the many blocks with holes, sockets, and perfectly straight lines carved into them, and those with smooth surfaces and level foundations. Many of the gray stone blocks at Pumapunku also display a perfectly formed cross inside of another cross. No tools have been recovered to account for these works, but researchers have ruled out hammerstones as being too crude for the job. Many of these stones were apparently meant to be interlocked, although no adjoining mail blocks have been discovered to confirm this. Among the many impressive stoneworks at Pumapunku are the rows of H blocks, so called for resembling the capital letter H. Geological studies starting in 2017 found organic matter in the stone that was used to date their construction to roughly 600 CE. The presence of organic substances strongly suggests that the stones were forged from a poured mixture composed of volcanic andesite sand and organic matter to bind it together. However, this dating and construction method are disputed. Writer and researcher Brian Forster has also found that these H-blocks and other nearby stones exhibit unusual magnetic properties. Exactly when Tiwanaku was founded is still in dispute. Current estimates from mainstream archaeologists range from 1580 BCE to 724 CE. A study in 2004 used radiocarbon dating on organic matter from Pumapunku, which produced an estimate of between 536 and 600 CE. However, excavations conducted in 2008 led archaeologists to conclude that the site was founded during the first 2 centuries of the Common Era. Researchers such as Brian Forster highlight how the various materials and techniques employed indicate multiple eras of construction, beginning with Pumapunku. This would suggest multiple eras of inhabitation, instead of a single rise and fall. The period of highest immigration is thought to have taken place after 600 CE, resulting in the development of sectors such as Chiji Jawira that apparently specialized in ceramics production. Tiwanaku's collapse is widely thought to have occurred around 1100, with historians and archaeologists pointing to causes like severe environmental stress and political upheaval, among others. For example, the scattered distribution of Tiwanaku's many stone blocks and the fact that Pumapunku was buried under several feet of mud are strongly indicative of cataclysmic activity like earthquakes and flooding. American geologist Robert Schock points to several blocks with sides that appear to have been melted by extreme heat, which he suggests was caused by a cataclysmic sun plasma event. Despite the mainstream consensus of a Common Era timeline, the site's architecture contains many clues pointing to a much older dating. Explorer and independent archaeologist Arthur Poznansky, who spent 50 years studying Andean history, proposed that the calendar carved into the gateway of the sun, as well as the placement of the gateway itself, were astronomically aligned to predict the seasons. Over a cycle of 41,000 years, Earth's angle to the celestial equator shifts between 22.1 and 24.5 degrees, making it possible to roll back the clock until the gateway aligns with the sunrise on the equinox and solstice. Poznansky calculated that the gateway was built in 15,000 BCE, but his calculations were later refined with satellite data to arrive at a date of roughly 10,000 BCE. Modern archaeologists such as Neil Steed and Oswald Rivera have expressed support for Poznansky's work. At 2 symmetrically opposed places on the gateway calendar are what archaeologists have argued are the heads of 2 crested condors. Writer Graham Hancock has suggested that viewed together, the 2 condor heads on the right side make up what looks to be a front-facing elephant head, displaying its ears, tusks, and trunk. Hancock notes that other carvings at Tiwanaku combine designs to make one object serve as another at varying levels of perspective. What's more, the mirror side of the gateway also depicts 2 condors side by side, but together they look distinctly different from the alleged elephant design. There are no elephants in South America, and most mastodon species are believed to have gone extinct over 11,000 years ago. The next closest candidate is an extinct species called Cuvironeus, which resembled modern elephants, but with larger tusks and smaller ears. Cuvironeus were numerous in the southern Andes prior to their extinction around 4000 BCE. Another design on the gateway appears to be a toxodon, a large amphibious mammal resembling a mix of rhino and hippo, considered to have gone extinct roughly 12,000 years ago. Hans Schindler Bellamy and Peter Allen have argued that the gateway contains at least 46 toxodon heads, and the animal has been found rendered in several sculptures and depicted on many recovered pottery fragments. Poznansky has also argued that 2 other species, Scelidotherium and Macrauchenia, may also be depicted in the artworks. Both of these species went extinct at the end of the last ice age. Beginning with his 1995 book, Fingerprints of the Gods, Hancock drew connections between several archaeological sites of the ancient world that, according to the mainstream interpretation of history, never interacted with one another. For example, Hancock notes that the handmade reed boats crafted by modern residents on an island in Lake Titicaca are nearly identical to those used by ancient Egyptians to sail and move stones along the Nile. Many features of Tiwanaku are anomalous to the region, and even the continent, but are found in other ancient sites around the world. For example, many of the largest monoliths in Pumapunku show evidence of having once been affixed by eye-shaped metal clamps. This technique is found nowhere else in South America, but is found in the temple complexes of Dendera in central Egypt, and in Cambodia's Angkor Wat. Analysis of a surviving clamp using a scanning electron microscope revealed that the metal had been poured while molten. Further, spectrographic analysis showed that the clamp contained 1.7% nickel, despite there being no known source of nickel in Bolivia. Hancock notes that Tiwanaku is one of many ancient megalithic stone sites that is said to have been built through the power of sound and sorcery. For example, one Inca tradition claims that the stones had been carried through the air to the sound of a trumpet, or of their own accord. This aligns with traditions on Easter Island, which state that great magicians used their mana power and words to walk the megalithic statues from the quarry. What's more, Maya legends claim that the Pyramid of the Magician located in Uxmal, Yucatan, was constructed overnight. The pyramid's other name, the House of the Dwarf, is a reference to another legend which holds that a dwarf with supernatural powers moved the heavy rocks by whistling. Similar levitation techniques are also described in an Egyptian record of a contest between an Egyptian and an Ethiopian magician. The latter is said to have raised an enormous stone vault above the pharaoh before the Egyptian spoke a spell which caused a great phantom boat to carry the stone away. Modern scientists have discovered how to make an object levitate by producing a standing sound wave, although they are currently able to lift only relatively small objects. Among the gateway's designs are 48 birdmen therianthropes, or human-animal hybrids of various combinations. Human-headed birds are also found in ancient Egyptian art to depict the heart soul, or the part of a human that survives death. Hancock connects the maritime designs on the Friar and Ponce monoliths to Mesopotamian myths describing civilizing fish-garbed figures known as the Apkalus. The Apkalus were said to be endowed with reason, and their leader gifted the people of Mesopotamia with knowledge of the arts and sciences, as well as of construction and agriculture. Several Babylonian and Assyrian reliefs portray bearded fish-garbed men holding objects in their hands. The fact that the Ponce and Friar statues have beards is significant, because the people indigenous to Tiwanaku were not able to grow beards. The pointed chins on the Easter Island statues are thought to represent beards as well. Another noteworthy feature of the Ponce and Friar statues is that the long fingers of the statues' hands meet at the navel. At Göbekli Tepe, an ancient site in Turkey dated to roughly 9,500 BCE, we find several megalithic stone pillars carved into anthropomorphic figures, with thick belts and long fingers outstretched towards their navels. A totem pole found at the site features the same motif. Likewise, the Easter Island Moai statues also place their hands on their stomachs and wear broad belts. The navel connection could be a reference to the shared namesake of these locations. Each was named after a creationist myth about the world emerging from the navel, or center point of the earth. What's more, the pillars at Göbekli Tepe also feature H designs very similar to the H blocks at Pumapunku. Tales of an advanced society predating the currently accepted origin of civilization date back to two of Plato's dialogues from 360 BCE. Plato told of the island city of Atlantis, said to exist 9,000 years before the birth of the Athenian leader Solon, or around 9,630 BCE. After a war with Athens, the island nation was sunk by an earthquake, and became an impassable barrier of mud. Some see the legend of Atlantis as a mythologized version of a global cataclysm that coincided with a dramatic rise in sea levels at the end of the last ice age around 9600 BCE. Canadian researchers Rand and Rose Flem Ath investigated the areas of the world to which a surviving civilization would have likely fled. They argued that the regions most suited to survival would be freshwater lakes at high altitude, making Lake Tana in Ethiopia and Lake Titicaca top candidates. Hancock demonstrates how Tiwanaku could have been inspired by the survivors of this doomed civilization, who attempted to pass on their knowledge and technology before it was lost to history. As evidence, he points to legends of the site's founding. Tiwanaku's city, Viracocha, is named after its founding creator god, who is described as having pale skin and a full beard. Viracocha and his companions are said to have arrived at Tiwanaku after a great flood that he caused, and appeared in human form from Lake Titicaca. Viracocha's name means foam of the sea, and he and his followers were said to walk on the waves as easily as they traversed the land. Viracocha is also credited with bestowing the people with his knowledge and philosophy, which he then spread to neighboring lands. Descriptions of Viracocha match closely with those of the ancient Mayan deity Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl is described as a white-skinned deity with large eyes, long hair, and a rounded beard. He is said to have taught the Maya how to cook and how to calculate the seasons, and he encouraged a more peaceful lifestyle. He is also said to have arrived from across the sea in a boat that moved by itself without paddles. The Egyptian god Osiris is another bearded god who is said to have civilized the people by abolishing cannibalism and teaching agriculture and animal husbandry, as well as writing, music, and architecture. Both Osiris and Quetzalcoatl are said to have spread their knowledge by traveling to foreign lands. Perhaps legends of Quetzalcoatl, Osiris, and other figures of the ancient world all point to one common event in world history, where a global cataclysm forced an advanced civilization to flee their native land and plant the seeds of civilization in fertile grounds. Tiwanaku is one of several sites in South America and around the world that may be much older than mainstream archaeologists currently believe. While it was no doubt inhabited for hundreds of years after, it may have originally been built by the survivors of a global cataclysm corresponding with the end of the last ice age. It was thus not only the template for the Inca civilization that followed it, but it may be a monument to a lost civilization that came before. Want to see more from Think Anomalous? Remember to click the bell so that you get notified when we make new videos, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Think Anomalous is created by Jason Charbonneau. Research and draft script by Clark Murphy. Music by Josh Chamberland.